Hello, Helena. It's Emily McVeigh, Executive Director of the United Way of the Lewis and Clark area, and we're back for our 2023 United Way Partner Spotlight. But today, we are our own partners. I'm here with Jeff Busher, who's our Community Impact Coordinator, and we're here to talk about the Point in Time survey that we help coordinate out of the United Way office. Tell us, what is the Point in Time survey?
The Point in Time survey, every year HUD has to do a count or an attempted count of our unsheltered population. And there's actually two parts to it. There is sheltered, folks who are in transitional housing, folks who are in places like the Hope Center or family housing at God's Love or the YWCA, folks who are in transition, and those are considered sheltered folks, and they count those. And then the other half of it is the unsheltered population, which are folks that are literally homeless, do not have a shelter, maybe on the streets, maybe in emergency shelters. And this year, we have to try to count folks who are utilizing Montana Emergency Rental Assistance Funds. So they may be utilizing state or federal funds, but they're lodging at hotels. And so we've got to count those folks as well. So there's sheltered population or precariously sheltered and unsheltered. So each year we gather about 20 to 30 volunteers. And this year the date, it's always the last Thursday of January. And this year it's January 26th. And we'll gather at 4 o'clock at the United Way office. They will have done some brief training online, and we'll do a brief training and then send folks out to try to count and interview folks about their current situation and where they're at. And let me also mention that these numbers are important because federal and state dollars are tied to those numbers. Based on how many people we count, dollars are attached to that in terms of coming into the community to provide services for those folks across the board. So
tell us a little bit about the numbers that we've seen. It has changed drastically over the last few years since we've been involved, and COVID didn't help us with our counting. And so tell us a little bit about the numbers we've seen and how that has looked during COVID, post-COVID, and what we might expect this year.
Well, it's and that's part of the value of this, is to be able to track, because we may get a sense, it seems like there are more unsheltered folks in our community. This gives us at least hopefully a semi-accurate number to look at the past years. And let me just go back. 2018, our count was 118 people. Last year, 2022, our count was 143. So that does show a small increase, but you're right, COVID did have an effect. We saw numbers as high as 200 and 298 during 2020 and 2021 because of the nature of how we counted people. The regular count is a 20-question survey that folks agree to answer some questions, and those are the folks that are counted, the folks that agree to do the survey. If someone declines to do the survey, they don't get counted. So on our COVID years, to try to protect our surveyors, we did what was called an observational survey. And what we did in those years was we simply looked at folks, whether they were sleeping on the street, whether they were in a car in the Walmart parking lot, if they were in a camper or a kind of a homemade shelter at a campground. We observationally counted them. Using that system, our numbers were considerably higher. In 2020, we were at 196, 200 people, close to 200 people. In 2021, we were at closer to 300, at 298. So that observational count, I think some might argue that was more accurate because we're just, because it wasn't relying on the survey.
I would say that's true because we've had a lot of people who don't want to be in the system. They don't want people to know where they live, so they refuse the survey. And we've known that over the years, so it probably balances out a little bit
exactly.
of that. Yeah.
In fact, in a recent conversation with one of our unsheltered neighbors, and he was a interesting character, but I told him what our numbers were and our estimate, and he said, "Oh no, I know a lot of people," and his estimate was over 400 people, and so and he, and he is a person that is on the street, so there may be some validity to his estimate as well. Regardless, the value of this point-in-time count is it gives us a handle on a few different things. Who are the people that are on the street? Because we try to identify male, female, race, ages.
Veteran, non-veteran.
Yeah, veterans, non-veterans. So we're able to break down who our unsheltered population really is.
And
so
how long
that's another side effect
Yeah.
or a value of that study.
And how long they've been unsheltered.
True,
Yeah.
true. In fact, one number I'll share from last year had to do with, chronically homeless, and someone that's chronically homeless, I believe, is either 1 year on unsheltered or a series of shorter periods that add up to 1 year. And that chronic homeless number for Helena was 54 of our unsheltered neighbors last year were chronically homeless. And that, to me, working with this population is probably pretty accurate. There's a significant handful of folks that are they're known by our law enforcement, they're known by our emergency department at the hospitals and urgent care centers. So that's probably a pretty accurate number, between 50 and 75 people who are locally chronically unsheltered.
Well, and not to sidetrack, but we do have the FUSE program, Frequent Users of Systems Engagement, which does have 50 clients and a wait list. So that number is pretty right on for that system. But I did sidetrack you a little bit before when we were talking about the count, and talk a little bit about how the move to cars and campers has really affected our ability to count our unsheltered neighbors.
Yeah, and I was just mentioning an article about folks in vehicles in Bozeman. That's one of their challenges, as is here in Helena. But for the safety of our folks who are conducting the survey, more people are going to campers and cars and finding creative places to park those vehicles. And we know some places where they park. And so when we send folks out, I ask them to still do an observational count. If they see, for example, a car in a parking lot that has a lot of belongings in it, there's a person sleeping in there, the windows are foggy, we are not asking our survey folks to knock on the window. If there's a camper that appears to be older, maybe likely someone living in it, we're not asking them to knock on those doors, just for the safety of our survey folks. We want everyone to be safe, and we also, this is Montana, we need to allow folks their privacy as well. And so, so we do an observational count. Folks will note, okay, person in a car, person in a camper, or occupied camper, whatever. So we'll have that count, which is kind of unofficial locally, but at the same time, we want to keep our survey folks safe. And when we do send out teams, and as I mentioned, we send about 30 people out on that evening on January 26th. We had about 30 volunteers last year. And when we send them out, we try to pair, and a good number of those folks are people who are already engaged with this population, folks from Good Samaritan, folks from God's Love, folks from other helping agencies, folks who work with our veterans that are unsheltered. And what we try to do is pair folks who have some experience with this population with maybe some new or unexperienced folks so that we understand the risks involved, and we try to avoid taking great risks and keep our survey folks safe.
And the people we're interviewing, we want them to be comfortable and safe and
Exactly,
willing,
exactly.
yeah.
We don't want to offend anybody. And I should also mention that as an incentive to participate in the survey, we do get some funding from the state coordinated entry program, and we're able to offer gift cards to our folks that take the survey just as a thank you, and to help thank them for their time to answer the survey questions.
Well, and we generally give out a pair of socks or gloves or something in
True.
addition because people are living on the streets and they need some warm gear.
Right.
So we actually had a bingo night at Missouri River Brewing a couple weeks ago.
That's right.
Where we collected a garbage bag full of socks and we played bingo and people donated. And so we have lots of socks and gloves to give away and some money to buy more as needed. So that's a nice thing to be able to say thank you for doing the survey, and not only a gift card to maybe a grocery store, McDonald's or something, but also a pair of socks and more.
That's true. And I'll mention this, the recent cold snap we had, folks were concerned about our unsheltered folks, as many of us were able to stay warm in our homes. And thinking about folks, fortunately our friends at God's Love were able to accommodate most of those folks. And as a result of that cold snap, we are visiting with the county and the city right now to put in place a plan for when we do have those seriously cold sub-zero evenings. We need a plan in place. And this point-in-time survey just helps reinforce the need for that kind of plan. And so it just helps us move forward. And what I was going to say was the community responded, not only the bingo night at the brewery, but folks are regularly dropping off socks, sweaters, blankets at the United Way.
And at God's Love.
And at God's Love. And at God's Love,
yeah.
yes, and at Good Samaritan. And we are able to utilize those and get them out to folks that need them. And that's very helpful. But we will use this data to move forward with, I think, a good plan. And not only is it, cold nights, which we certainly experience regularly here in Montana, but, thinking ahead, we might want to think about hot weather. And is there going to be a need in the summer for cooling centers and other frankly, disaster relief situations. And so that's why we're having these conversations with the city and the county to put some plans in place that will help us move forward effectively.
Sure. And just to be clear, that conversation is for what happens when God's Love is full. Because
right.
they take on a lot of extra people during those colder nights and the winter days. They stay open all the time, 24/7. They do everything they physically possibly can to take care of people. And one day we're going to find that we have more people than they can fit in their building. So what's the backup plan? So that's really what we're looking at. Is not
exactly. And during that cold snap, our place, which is primarily a place for some programming, for some groups, folks who are in recovery, that's their primary purpose. But during that cold snap, they opened their doors and let folks in just as a warming center, as did one of our local churches. And we appreciate that kind of help. But as I said, we'll use this data, and moving forward, we'll have a better plan in place.
And I just want to mention real quick, one of the things that happens in this count, like you were talking about, people don't necessarily get counted. They're unofficial numbers that we know about. So if a camper is connected to power and water, the person living in that camper is not technically homeless according to HUD. If a child, who the school district does their own count, if a child is couch surfing with family members, they are not truly homeless according to HUD. There's a lot of things that don't qualify as homeless according to HUD, so they don't end up in our numbers. What we know is there's a lot bigger population out there than what is reflected in that 143 people that we counted last year. And I think that is something really worth pointing out to people as we go through these conversations every year.
That's true. The school district uses a different standard for unsheltered or homeless for example, high school and junior high students. If someone is couch surfing, not with their family, and not at their primary residence, then according to the McKinney-Vento series of standards, then that person is homeless. That student is homeless. And so we often see numbers from the school district that indicate at any given time during the school year, students, 300 to 400 students may be, in their definition, homeless because they are couch surfing or living with an extended relative or in a car or other places not meant for habitation. And that's the key for HUD, folks who are living in a place not meant for habitation. So when we say truly unsheltered, outside in a makeshift tent, whatever, or even a tent, that's our literally HUD-defined unsheltered population. So,
all right, we're almost out of time.
Okay.
So really quickly, tell us about how all of this is moving into the conversation with the Community Health Improvement Plan over the next 3 years and the team that you're creating called Move the Needle.
Right. Our unsheltered population are kind of the most difficult tier to try to get housed, but we know that there are upstream challenges. We know that there is a need for affordable housing, not only in Helena, but across our state, across our country. And we didn't get here overnight. And in 2018, there was a Tri-County Housing Needs Assessment done, and there were 7 or 8 pages of goals and action plans that were put in place. Well, that was 2018, and last couple of years we've had this little COVID thing going on, and that probably slowed the process on those goals and actions. So,
but they've made good progress on
they
some
absolutely
of them, yes.
have. The
We'll
city,
give credit, yes.
The city and the county have made some progress on those goals, and we want to acknowledge that. But moving forward, the reason we called it Move the Needle is we felt like the community needs to come together. The folks that have a say and are affected by these challenges need to come together and try to move the needle on whatever challenges they may be. The areas that we identified were our vulnerable populations, trying to address the need of density. For example, we need multifamily units, we need apartments, condos, things like that. And there may be some restrictions or the issue of NIMBYism. I don't want a condo in my neighborhood, whatever. We're trying to address some of those needs. Also, policies and planning. Are there things in place that make it challenging to create affordable housing in the community? And then also, I'm trying to think of the fourth one. It had to do with,
One of them is creative solutions.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
Accessory
sorry.
dwelling
Funding.
units,
Yeah.
those kinds.
Funding is the fourth area, and that is how do we fund some of these things? Everything from tax credits to land trusts to things like that. How can we be creative about finding ways to move the needle on these challenges for affordable housing? And so if we're wrapping up, I would say 2 things. If you would like to volunteer with the Point in Time survey, please send me an email at the United Way. Our information's online. And if you would like to be involved in this Move the Needle conversation in any of those areas, again, drop me an email. Tell me you're interested in helping us to make some progress on those goals and action plans. And we'll get you plugged in, and we will work toward creating Helena is a friendly, generous place, but boy, we just need some affordable housing for middle to low income folks. And as we get down to our unsheltered folks, we need some solutions there as well. And we're going to keep working on those moving forward.
Great. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks, Helena, for listening in on the point in time survey information. If you want more information from the United Way, you can give us a call at 442-4360 or visit our website at unitedwaylca.org. See you next week.